Perceptive Power, Chapter 2, Consciousness and Sensation. Consciousness is one of the greatest mysteries of your being. You know perfectly well what it is to experience consciousness, but you know this largely by reason of its difference from unconsciousness. You find it almost impossible to define it satisfactorily, though you have not the slightest difficulty in distinguishing it from unconsciousness. It is unique. It is different from anything else of which you have knowledge or experience. This because it is only by means of it that you have any knowledge or experience of anything else. There are no other terms synonymous with it. If you seek to define it at all, you must employ the terms of consciousness in order to attempt the definition. The dictionaries help us but little, for they too must use the terms of consciousness in order to state the definition, and this is very unsatisfactory. The following examples of standard definitions of the term will illustrate this fact. Consciousness is the knowledge of one's own existence, sensations, mental operations, etc. Consciousness is the state of being aware of one's own existence, his condition, his sensations, his thoughts, feelings, and actions. Consciousness is that indefinable characteristic of mental states which causes us to be aware of them. From the position of strict logical thought, consciousness is incapable of definition because there is nothing else except its negation, i.e., unconsciousness, with which to compare it. It resembles nothing else, and a logical definition requires the terms of something else with which to define logically any certain thing. The only way, then, to understand consciousness is to experience it. Fortunately, all of us have had such experience, otherwise we should never be able to understand what is meant by the term. The least objectionable term to employ in an attempt to define it, perhaps, is the term awareness. But at the last, you perceive that you cannot be aware of anything unless you are conscious of it in at least some degree. When we pass from the realm of psychology to that of physiology, we are no more successful in our efforts to explain consciousness. We discover that the presence of nervous tissue is necessary in order to experience consciousness. But whether that nervous tissue is the cause of consciousness or is merely the machinery by which the latter is manifested, scientists are unable to decide to their perfect satisfaction. Even Huxley, with his giant intellect, was compelled to report that how it is that anything so remarkable as consciousness comes about by the result of irritating nervous tissue is just as unaccountable as the appearance of the genie when Aladdin rubbed the lamp. It is at least somewhat comforting to realize that one's own ignorance on this point is shared by even the greatest thinkers of past and present. It must not be supposed that you are conscious of every impression made upon your mind, of every sensation reaching you through the channels of the senses. Attention decides for you which of such reports from the outside world rise to the plane of consciousness, and to what degree, if any, they awaken your conscious perception of them. There are countless sensations reaching you through your sense organs of which you are not even dimly conscious, and which you do not perceive. Here, attention performs its work of selection for you, it itself being influenced by other mental states. Attention is that wonderful mental power or faculty which may be described as either the focusing of consciousness or else the detention in consciousness. Likewise, it is true that your mind is at no time conscious of all of its contents, its accumulated experiences. In fact, at any one time, you are conscious of but a very small portion of the contents of your mind. The remainder slumbers quietly in the realms of the subconscious planes of your mental empire, from whence they may be called forth when needed by memory or imagination. As your world of experience enlarges, there is a constantly increasing store of these accumulated experiences placed for safekeeping in the subconscious regions of your mind. They are preserved there awaiting their recall into consciousness by the act of recollection or that of imagination. Finally, it is an error to suppose that you are directly conscious of the objects of the outside world. You are conscious merely of certain mental states or conditions within you, which in turn have arisen by reason of the excitation of certain nervous tissues associated with your consciousing faculties, whatever these may be at the last. This excitation being caused by the sensory impulses which you pass to the nervous tissues over the sensory nerves, the outer ends of which receive the impressions arising from their contact with outside forces. For instance, when you see the pages of this book, you are merely perceiving the existence of these mental states arising from the excitation of certain nervous tissue connected with your optic nerves. The optic nerves report the contact with certain vibrations of the light waves reflected from the surface of the page, and which thus carry the image, shadow, or picture of the printed page to the nervous tissue of the optical apparatus, just as they would carry them to the photographic plate or film in the camera. There is a difference here, however, one which makes all the difference in the world. While both the photographic plate and the retina of your eye alike register the light waves and thus produce the image, picture, or shadow of the outside thing, nevertheless, the photographic plate is unconscious of it. It has nothing with which to do the consciousing. On the contrary, your mind is conscious of it, for it has something which consciouses and becomes aware of such reports. The photographic plate neither knows nor knows that it knows, but your mind not only knows the report, but your IMI also knows that your mind knows. You not only know, but you know that you know. This is more than a play on words. It represents an important fact of conscious experience. That there is something in the outside world, the world external to our minds, we know. Even the quite clever metaphysical reasoning of certain extreme subjective idealists fails to shake our fundamental belief that something exists outside of our own mental world. But just what that something really is, philosophers inform us we shall never know. They tell us that we have nothing to know with it. All that we can directly know is our mental pictures, representations, or photographs of that something outside, which, as you have seen, are transmitted through our sense apparatus. Profound philosophers hold that not but an omniscient mind possibly can know the outside world in itself. What it is in itself equals that which it is known to be by and to such infinite mind. Our world of experience, then, is but the mind's symbolic representation of the something outside of that universe as it is in itself, and as an omniscient mind does, or would, know it to be in its ultimate verity. Our world of experience, then, is but the mind's symbolic representation of the something outside of that universe as it is in itself, and as an omniscient mind does, or would, know it to be in its ultimate verity. At the best, our mental picture of it is but symbolic and approximate. Its degree of verity depends upon the effectiveness and efficiency of our mental photography, and this in turn depends upon the quality and efficient employment of our mental photographic apparatus. This has led certain schools of philosophy and psychology to assert as an axiom the following statement: the total content of consciousness is of sense origin. The higher activities of mind, as well as the lower, are results left by the impressions originally made upon the mind by external objects through sensations. Our sensations are our elementary modes of being conscious, our elementary elements of experience, which are conditioned upon some of our organs of sense. Psychology informs us that the redness of the brick or of the rose is not in those objects themselves, but is within ourselves. It says, the redness, as you call it, is a question of relation between your optic nerve and the light waves which it is unable to absorb. In a lesser light, the redness will be purple. At night, it will be black. A very little deviation from normal vision on your part, i.e. color blindness, would make it green. Zien speaks of the obvious error of former centuries, first refuted by Locke, though still shared by naive thought today, i.e. that the objects about us are colored, warm, cold, etc. The nervous apparatus selects only certain motions of matter or of ether, which they transform into that form of nerve excitation with which they are familiar. It is only this nerve excitation which we perceive as red, warm, or hard. Gordy says, The colors and sounds and odors that seem to fill the scene before us are only mental facts, things which, like the joys and sorrows, the hopes and fears that make up our conscious life, exist in our own minds and nowhere else. When we follow an imagination, the vibrations of air radiating from the singing birds in every direction, and the waves of light radiating from the leaves of the trees, we are forced to conclude that leaves, songs of birds, blossoms, flowers are only exciting causes and effects which appear in our conscious life as sensations. The colors and sounds that we think of in ordinary life that thrust themselves upon our notice at every moment are not the undulations of ether and vibrations of air, things that science has learned about only after centuries of investigation, but are the colors and sounds of experience, sensations. Before we began our investigations, we thought that the odors, sounds, and colors of which we have direct knowledge are physical facts external to the mind. But we have learned that these supposed physical facts are not physical facts at all. We must say either that the world of sounds and tastes and odors and colors is purely subjective, in the sense of consisting of our own mental facts, or else that the conclusions reached by us are wrong. But we caution you here not to make the mistake common to many who fail to realize that a little learning is a dangerous thing, and who rush to the conclusion that the outside somethings have no existence whatever outside of our sensations concerning them. Even some brilliant philosophers have at times made this mistake. It has well been said of this extreme idealistic theory that though it has never been logically disproved, yet no one really has ever believed and acted upon it. Even the metaphysicians, asserting that the world is our dream, have failed to act upon the hypothesis. Something in us tells us that something is there. Reason asserts itself. Sanity is preserved. The philosophers of more evenly balanced philosophical temper have sought and found the golden mean, from which position they assert that though we can never know the something outside as it is in itself, as omniscient mind does or would know it, and though we can know only our more or less indistinct, distorted, and imperfect symbolic pictures, shadows, or photographs of it, nevertheless, common sense and practical reason assures us that something is there, at the least, certain exciting forces which produce in us the exciting effects called sensations. In steering clear of the scylla of the naive beliefs of the man on the street who holds that the substance of our sensations is in the things themselves rather than in us, we must be equally careful to avoid the charbitus of those schools of subjective idealism, which go so far as to hold that the things themselves have no existence in themselves, but exist solely in our minds. Here as elsewhere, beware of the extremes. Seek the middle channel, the middle of the road. Strive to attain and maintain the golden mean. Something is there, and we are conscious of it, though our consciousness is indirect. The senses. You have seen that in the reports of sensation, you have the raw materials of knowledge. Sensation is an elementary state of consciousness resulting from nerve action. As you have seen, when the retina is stimulated by light, the irritation is carried by the optic nerve to the nervous tissue of the brain. Excitation of that tissue arises, consciousness results, and sensation occurs. You have also seen that just why this happens is unknown to mankind, but this is how it happens. The same rule also applies to sensations arising from the senses of hearing, taste, smell, or touch, from any or all of the phases of the elementary sense of feeling. For know you that all the senses are but modifications of the original sense of feeling. It is probable that you do not as yet fully realize the tremendous importance of the senses to you in the creation of your world of experience, or how dependent you are upon these sense reports from the outside world, which the eye cannot contact directly or without the intermediary of the sensory nervous system. Perhaps you will appreciate this fact more fully if you will try to imagine what your consciousness would be had you been born without any of the five senses. Make the experiment. Give your imagination a little exercise. The use of your imagination in this way will reveal to you the fact that Even if you had been born with the most perfectly formed brain, composed of the finest grade of brain matter, and with the advantages of the best mental inheritance in the way of natural capacity for mental activity, you would be absolutely devoid of any conscious world of experience had all the natural and normal inlets of the senses remained closed by reason of physical imperfection. In such case, your mind would remain as dormant as a seed buried in soil unfitted to produce its germination. You would be cut off from all that communication with the outer world with which all of your original experiences must come, and from which you receive all the knowledge which constitutes your world of experience. You would not know, nor could you know, anything whatsoever concerning what exists in that outer world or what events are occurring there. Your only knowledge would be that of your self existence, and even that you would not be able to express in words or in the symbols of thought. Professor R.P. Halleck has strikingly pictured the condition of a person born with this frightful handicap as follows. Suppose a child of intelligent parents were ushered into the world without a nerve leading from his otherwise perfect brain to any portion of his body, with no optic nerve to transmit the glorious sensations from the eye, no auditory nerve to convey the touch of a hand, no olfactory nerve to rouse the brain with the delicate aroma from the orchards and the wildflowers in spring, no gustatory, thermal, or muscular nerves. Could such a child live as the years rolled on? The books of Shakespeare and of Milton would be opened in vain before the child's eyes. The wisest men might talk to him with strongest eloquence, all to no purpose. Nature could not whisper one of her inspiring truths into his deaf ear, could not light up that dark mind with a picture in the rainbow or of the human face. No matter how perfect might be the child's brain and his inherited capacity for mental activities, his faculties would remain for his life shrouded in Egyptian darkness. Perception could give memory nothing to retain, and thought could not weave her matchless fabrics without materials. The above is no mere fanciful picture. On the contrary, it is a statement of the position of science and philosophy considering the dependence of the mind upon the avenues of sensation for the materials of the higher and more complex mental processes. The mind is as much dependent upon the material of sensations for its sustenance as is the body dependent upon food for its nourishment. Both mind and body require for their respective activities the material from the outside world. This supplied both mind and body are able to convert, transform, and transmute this material into more complex forms of activity and substance. A celebrated philosopher and psychologist once asked his students to consider the fanciful possibilities arising from a case in which the nerves of sight should be attached to the areas of the brain concerned with the office of hearing, and those of hearing with the areas of sight, the faculties of the receiving apparatus thus exchanging duties. In such case, one would hear all colors and would see all sounds. One would thus perceive the sounds of flowers and paintings and would see the beauties of the musical notes of the great composers. In such a case, the outer world would still be sending him the same messages, but he would be interpreting them differently. A writer commenting on this possibility has said, beauty would still be ours, though speaking another tongue. The bird's song would then strike our retina as a pageant of colors. We would see all the magical tones of the wind. Here is a great fugue, the repeated and harmonized greens of the forest, the cadences of stormy skies. This illustration, of course, is pure artistic fancy, but the result is logically pictured. It will serve to illustrate how dependent we are upon the mechanism of consciousness in its phase of sensation. Psychologists have also pointed out the fact that the world of experience of the individual is decreased by the absence of the power of normal functioning in any one or more of his several senses, and that this world of experience would be increased if he were able to evolve additional senses. This is more than mere speculation, for science shows us that the sense of feeling was the elementary sense, from which all the other senses have been evolved. And that is well within the possibilities of evolution that additional senses may be unfolded in the course of the evolutionary development of living forms. In order to give you a personal illustration of your dependence upon your senses for the character and extent of your world of experience, we ask you here to use your imagination once more. Begin by imagining what the outside world would mean to you if you were merely a one-sense individual, possessed merely of the sense of touch. Your entire field of knowledge would be limited to your idea of how things feel to your touch. It would be a very small world of experience, would it not? Then imagine yourself as evolving the senses of taste and smell, those half-brothers in the sense world. Can you not see how your world would enlarge? How its character would change? Then imagine yourself as evolving the sense of hearing and realize the wonderful addition to your world of experience that such would furnish. And then last of all, imagine that some wonderful day your sense of sight would suddenly unfold into activity and the great world of sight experience would unfold before your consciousness. Can you not see by this how materially your world of experience depends upon sensation, how each new sense adds to it and each lacking sense detracts and subtracts from it? Your imagination employed in this flight has taught you a valuable lesson and a true one. In the same way, you will see that the possession of an additional sense, a sense as yet not evolved by man, would enable you to know the world in an entirely new way. There are undoubtedly properties in material objects of which you remain in total ignorance solely by reason of the absence of appropriate senses through which to become aware of them. Even as it is, you are able to hear only a small portion of the vibrations of sound, or to see only a small portion of the waves of light. Instruments invented by science are able to catch and record sound waves and light waves, which your senses fail to register. Only a very small proportion of the outer world is really revealed to you through your senses. This because of the fact that your sense instruments are not capable of registering them. A further evolution of your senses would enable you to become aware of an entirely new world of things which exist on all sides of you, but which form no part of your inner world of experience. The microscope, the telescope, and other optical instruments show what your normal sight would perceive were your optical mechanism of a higher order. Delicate apparatus reveals sounds which your normal hearing would perceive were your auditory organs of a finer order. Delicate photographic plates register light waves which your eyes perceive not, but which would become apparent to you were your optical mechanism more perfect. These supplementary senses, as these scientific appliances have been called, reveal to you the presence of objects and qualities of objects which are unknown to you when you depend upon your normal sense organs. Moreover, certain of the lower animals have a higher development of certain senses than is man. In fact, some careful thinkers even believe that certain of the lower animals possess senses lacking in man. The far-seeing eye of the eagle and the hawk perceive distant objects invisible to man. Most of the lower animals have preserved that fine and delicate sense of smell which man has lost by disuse in the course of his rise to civilization, and some of the insects undoubtedly hear sounds below the register of the human ear. An additional sense undoubtedly would open up a new world to you. Fancy the result of the development in you of a new sense which would register the waves of electricity or magnetism. In such case, you would be able to see or hear what is going on at a great distances, even on the other side of the globe. Fancy may even picture you possessed of a sense enabling you to become aware of the waves of wireless telegraphy. A sense capable of registering the X-ray waves would enable you to see through a stone wall and to perceive what is going on inside of a brick house or on the other side of a closed door. A similar extension of your senses of sight might enable you to see what is happening on Mars, or to perceive the life of the microscopic world in the drop of water. If you had appropriate sense instruments, you might even catch the vibrations of the thought activities of others. A telepathic sense certainly would be most interesting and instructive. Scientific imagination has pictured worlds in which living creatures possess 7, 9, 15, or more senses, and this is possible, theoretically, for 17 senses would be really no more wonderful than our 5, though they would seem so to 5-sense creatures. Listen to these statements made by careful thinkers. Kay says, an additional sense might probably make revelations to us no less surprising than the sense of sight to one who has been born blind. Carpenter says, it does not seem at all improbable that there are properties of matter of which none of our senses can take immediate cognizance, and which other beings might be formed to perceive in the same manner as we are sensible to light, sound, etc. Mason says, if a new sense or two were added to the present normal number in man, that which is now the phenomenal world for all of us might, for all we know, burst into something amazingly wider and different in consequence of the additional revelations through these new senses. Isaac Taylor says, it is not to be thought that the eye of man is the measure of the Creator's power. Has he created nothing which he has not exposed to our senses? The contrary seems much more than barely possible. Ought we not to think it almost certain? However, we have presented to you the above stated speculative and apparently somewhat fanciful ideas merely for the purpose of bringing to you a clearer and more comprehensive conception of the relation between yourself and the outside world, and to show you how dependent you are upon your senses for the material with which you build up and create your world of experience. We have no desire to urge you to develop new senses, rest assured. But our purpose is nonetheless constructive and in the direction of opening up to you new worlds of knowledge, a new world of experience. For know you that there is almost, if not quite, as much difference between the world of experience of a man of untrained and undeveloped powers of attention, perception, and observation, and that of the man who has highly developed these mental powers, as there would be between the latter individual and the one who had developed one or more new senses. You have but to contrast the man of highly developed perceptive powers with one of the opposite type to realize that the two individuals dwell in entirely different worlds of experience. The former sees, hears, feels, and knows a multitude of facts of life and nature which are entirely unperceived and unknown to the latter type of individual. The developed man recognizes, considers, and solves problems, the very existence of which is unknown to the undeveloped man. It is as if the two types see with different eyes, hear with different ears, feel with different nerves of touch. In this book, we are striving not to endow you with additional senses, but to enable you to perfect the senses you already possess, to perfect them to such an extent that they will take on powers and possibilities, effectiveness and active qualities, which to the uninitiated seem to be the result of additional mental faculties possessed only by the favored few and denied to the great masses of the human race.